The Guns on Pegs podcast is brought to you by ITAP Group. Hello and welcome to the Guns on Pegs podcast. My name is George Brown. Chris Horn is here. How are things, Chris?
Very good, George. Very good. Mixed, actually.
Oh dear.
We had first shoot day last week. Come back to that in a minute. But then all the chickens got nailed yesterday.
Oh, what, fox?
The whole lot of them. Well, this is the debate. Obviously, this was once we'd got over the initial shock of the fact that I had no breakfast. We then spent the whole day debating what it could have been. We think fox. Most likely, isn't it? Let's be honest.
How much chicken was left?
So we had 8 chickens. 2 had heads.
Ooh. Sounds possibly stoaty.
It does. My initial reaction was, ferrety, polecatty.
Oh dear.
Things. But then apparently foxes just love ripping heads off chickens. Who knew?
Well, you have my commiserations. Very sad.
Well, do you know the good news though?
You can buy more chickens.
Yes, so I'm already in. I've gone to the same rescue place to buy some more bad egg-producing rescue chickens. A minimum donation now. It's gone up. It's now £2.75 per chicken minimum donation. The good news is that nearly 3-year-old Annabelle took it very well. Mr. Fox has taken the chickens and then started laughing. So I was like, thank goodness for that. And how's things your end?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Very good indeed. We had our first shoot day at home this weekend, which all went swimmingly. Well, I say swimmingly. A very successful day in terms of the shooting. The birds flew well. We shot 54. 2 minor hiccups.
Right.
The first took place when the first bird of the day was shot, which was shot by me, shot a partridge, and it was sort of crossing but coming straight at me, if you see what I mean. So it was coming from my neighbouring peg. It was sort of swung round on the wind and a bit of a curve on the line. I shot it and then turned to my right to address another bird going over my right shoulder. I just missed that one and was breaking my gun to reload. And the first partridge slammed, and I mean slammed, into my upper thigh. And I've now got quite a significant sort of partridge-shaped bruise on my thigh, which is quite uncomfortable. So I'm walking with a bit of a limp. I'm quite fortunate that I had turned to take the bird on my right, though, because I think if I'd not, it would have hit me in a far more uncomfortable place, and that might have been the end of my day. But I mean, at the end of the drive, my sister said, "What on earth happened to you? You were sort of hopping about like a crazy man," and it was quite a shock. And yeah, the bruise is pretty significant.
It's interesting that you should bring this up because last Monday I had my first day out in England. Long time since that.
I love that distinction.
Long time since that walked out grouse day. I had a moment on one of the drives where I could have caught the bird I shot, first barrel partridge.
Wow, that would have been brave.
Well, indeed. But obviously, straight after it happened, you think that's never going to happen again. I wouldn't have had that opportunity. And I just thought, I don't know. I've seen pictures of or videos of people trying to do this, or certainly seen one on YouTube, I think, which is quite impressive. A bloke catching a partridge. And obviously, the first thought that goes through in your head is, how much would that have hurt if I had have done it? And I think you've just answered that question.
Yeah, I think it depends which bit hits you as well. Because I think if you get, the beak's going to go through your hand if you try and catch it.
But if you've got your arm out in a thick jacket, right, and you sort of catch it like an up and under rugby ball.
Yeah.
Do you think you're all right?
I mean, yeah, you probably have to take a step back. It's going to be travelling.
Well, that's the other thing is the gun was still loaded, 1 barrel left, because obviously I shot it first barrel, you know me. And
all right.
So obviously that is incredibly dangerous. But so I didn't, erred on the side of caution, but there you go.
Yeah. And so then the other minor catastrophe was that immediately after the first drive, the gun bus developed a flat tyre. So we then had to all walk back to the farmyard and pile into cars. So those being the only 2 hiccups and the first time through, it's being chalked up as a roaring success.
Yeah, I agree. Sounds like it. I
Yeah.
think first days across the country wouldn't have been so positive for sure.
Yeah. And it was just lovely weather, really nice crowd, and all round very nice time. So
I must
yeah,
put a shout out to Duncan Clark at Braxter Park. You're obviously a guest of ours when you were away, actually, and Digby and I did the pod.
Yeah.
Relative not long ago. I was shooting with him last Monday. And it was really lovely because it's one of those estates. There's very few places where you still shoot from the big house on the place owned by the owner. You know that like shooting world has changed and obviously all these things don't quite work they used to. It's just really lovely doing that, moving from the big house in the gun bus back to the big house for lunch, that type of thing. Obviously, what a lot of Americans come over to the UK to do, and that is one of those places where you can do it.
Yeah. How nice. Yeah. Really lovely.
Yeah.
Right. So, Chris, tell us about our guest.
Our guest today was supplements editor at The Spectator. So this person is well educated, well spoken, knows exactly how to string a sentence together. She is a freelance journalist writing for the likes of Daily Telegraph, the Daily Mail, Horse and Hound, one of her real passions. She's head of communications at the National Gamekeepers Organisation, keen horsewoman and gain shot, and also one of our reputable 30 Scribehound countryside writers. So a very warm welcome to Camilla Swift.
Hello.
How are you?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, good.
Very good to have you with us, Camilla.
No pressure. I apologise for that.
No, I know all of that. God, I'm like, who is this person? I've never met her.
Well, I mean that's sort of what I wanted to ask you about, really, because whenever I open Instagram, you appear to be out doing something fun. You know, walking hound pups, out on the horse, shooting, clays, game. How do you squeeze in some work? Is it
Some work. With difficulty. I try to be prepared. Well, I try when I can. And well, I guess modern technology is very helpful in that I can do emails from wherever. Horses don't really help, but out on foot, I know it can be frowned upon. It depends where I am. But I always try and, I have set days that I know that I'm going to be in office, even if it's half a day and I know I can dedicate half an afternoon to going to sit at my desk from 1 till 5 and be there and address, especially if it's, I know I've got to write a piece for George and George is saying, hurry up, Camilla, you're supposed to be filing your Scribehound piece. I'm like, okay, fine. Yeah, I'm going to sit down at my desk from 1 till 4. I know what I'm writing and do it. So yeah, it's a balance, but part of why I am where I am today in terms of what Chris just said is because I wanted to not be in an office in London, even though it was an excellent, really exciting, amazing magazine office in London. I did 10 years of that and thought actually I could be riding my pony instead of sitting at my desk. So that was sort of my lifestyle change that I tried to make.
So many people who've got a passion of one of the various aspects of the countryside say exactly those words, don't they? I did 10 years in London and now I'm not there.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Camilla, like me and Chris, you're a fellow chicken tragic, I think. Any advice for Chris on how to keep his new chickens safe?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what your setup is. I actually just got 6 new. I didn't mean to. I got 6 of their former battery rescues. So I felt a bit sorry. I've got 1 cockerel, but he's a Brahma. So it's a bit, well, I know George will be quite jealous of my cockerel.
Hugely
he's a big
jealous.
Brahma. And I ended up with only 4 hens. And I was like, this is not fair. So I was going to get 3 from the chicken rescue. Fresh start for hens we have.
Yeah, that's who
and
I
then
got
maybe
them from.
1 or 2 from, the pretty ones. And I got 6 from Fresh Start for hens. So now I've got 6 brown ones. But then, it's good because otherwise they'd just be chucked out at 72 weeks. And so that makes me feel a bit better. But I didn't really want, but safety wise, I don't know.
So the pen is dug 2 foot deep all around with the fence, the solid like metal mesh fence.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's got like a prison style overhang at the top of that with 3 layers of barbed wire.
Barbed wire?
Yeah, around the
Bloody
top.
hell.
And what we think, the fox literally climbed the fence through the barbed wire because I found a couple of blood marks and some feathers of whatever it took. I don't know why. It didn't really eat them. It just ran off with the heads, I think. Well, I can't find the heads, so I'm assuming this is what it did. But what a weird fox. Is that what they do?
I think they tend to kill everything, don't they? Whereas a badger kills one, eats it, and then leaves the others for tomorrow. It's like, here's my chicken larder. Whereas a fox is like, woohoo, to get them all.
Interesting.
I don't know. That's impressive because it does sound like you have a chicken,
Fort
prison.
Knox,
Yeah.
it is chicken prison. It is literally that. So I think the electric fence at the top is the only thing that I can think of.
That, or you're just going to have to sit out with the 2-2 for a couple of nights.
Yeah.
It'll be back for whatever it was.
Yeah.
If it's a badger, don't shoot it.
No.
Thanks
But
for
then
the
you might
advice.
just get another one coming instead.
Well, that's the thing. You get rid of one, it would just be replaced by another, won't it? And I'm far too busy to sit out every night, and that would really not be conducive to a happy marriage. Well, yeah, I feel really unlucky on the basis we do have a chicken prison, but thank you. Didn't you mention something about weeing, George?
Well, I mean, it's a bit of a sort of old wives' tale thing, isn't it? But it's definitely the case that if you have a wee in the vicinity of your chicken run, then you're going to be leaving your scent around. And a lot of foxes are not keen on that. I've even heard somewhere about people going to the local zoo and getting the poo of like a big predator, like a tiger or something, to keep foxes away. That can be very effective because they smell that and go, well, something big and scary is over there. I'm not going anywhere near it.
You could probably go on eBay and
but then of course you do have to have tiger shit kicking around everywhere.
I've heard that too. So probably if two of us have heard it, must be true. So yeah.
It was the same fake news on the internet, probably.
Yeah, maybe. Someone trying to get rid of all their tiger shit.
I am going to go on eBay and order some tiger shit and see what happens.
Okay, tiger shit aside, I think it's about time that we all had a drink. So I'm going to start with you, Camilla. What's that you're drinking?
I've got 2 drinks, actually. So I knew I was going to be here for a while. So I've got a cup of tea, Yorkshire tea with milk in a mug. And then I have are we allowed to do branding? My lovely pink Yeti flask, which is my favourite, with orange squash. So I've got hot and cold and sugar.
You're going to see a theme in a second, George, and this is what happens when we have pods on Mondays.
Okay, go on then, Chris.
I'm drinking exactly the same drink I was drinking this time last Monday.
Remind me what that was.
So I just finished shooting. So what would you drink when you just finished shooting? What's the ideal scenario for you?
Well, I would probably be having a cold lager.
Yeah, but I do like a beer straight after, but often got to drive home.
Yeah.
But the first thing you get offered when you get back in, wet day, windy.
You're also drinking tea, is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. I have a mug of Earl Grey in my Claire Brownlow mug, pheasant feather art.
Very nice.
And I have a cookie made by my daughter and my wife. So I'm in this is good Monday afternoon spirits, I think. It's also I had exactly that feeling when the kettle was brewing, thinking back to last Monday, come in from the shoot day, wet, cold, it's a really nice feeling when you get that first cup of tea. So I'm quite enjoying it.
Oh, well, good news is one of us is keeping the flame alive.
Go on.
I wish it was more fancy now. It is an absolutely bog standard supermarket lager, but it's extremely cold. And I've had, we've got the podcast shoot day at the end of the week, so I'm not going completely crazy because I think the Thursday night might be quite full on. And obviously shooting on Saturday was quite full on as well. Yes, just a nice cold lager to keep.
How bog standard is this cold lager?
Oh, extremely bog standard. It's Estrella.
Very.
And
you're right. Thursday night's going to be heavy with all the Garter owners.
Yep.
Shooting. And I've just had one of my key plans let down. I needed to sort of warm Cora, our yellow lab, up for the shoot day on Friday. So a couple of us are going for a round of golf at this local golf course in Sussex, near where we're shooting. And I thought, perfect. What I'm going to do is coat all my golf balls in the pheasant scent that you put on the dummies. And then I'm literally going to come back from this round having not lofted the ball, because when I ding one 300 yards into the deep rough, just going to go, get back to the dog and then send her back looking for the golf balls. Anyway, I went onto their website and it's one of these posh golf courses with a strict no dogs policy. So I've absolutely had my Thursday ruined by that. Which is a shame.
That's a real shame. Poor Cora.
I know. She's going to have to sit in the car while we play golf.
Well, you're going to have to stock up on golf balls.
That too. She's a money-saving device. Golf balls are expensive these days. A lot more expensive than shotgun cartridges.
Are they really? I suppose they are.
Oh
Yeah,
God, yeah.
they are. They are more than one use though. Cartridges are very much single use. Well, I mean, I haven't seen you play golf. Maybe they are not single use.
I was going to say Chris's golf balls might be single use by the sound of things.
I don't lose them when I'm putting, if I'm honest.
Good. Right. Well, I think we'll move on. So, Camilla, we're going to do a segment that we call Whose Bird Is It Anyway? And it's when we ask our listeners to send in their shooting quandaries and queries and dilemmas and all that sort of thing. And we do our best to offer sensible or not so sensible advice. We always keep our correspondents anonymous to protect them. And this one comes from somebody I have decided to call Gregor, who has written, "May I contribute this as a difficult quandary? This all happened recently whilst I attended a magnificent partridge shoot where a great time was had by all, and especially by the wonderful collection of dogs present. However, at the end of the last drive, all the beaters, guns, and pickers up were eagerly engaged in conversation whilst recovering the last of the quarry. Guns and dogs equally competitive about their afternoon's prowess. However, a couple of dogs started to argue about whose bird it was anyway. A scuffle broke out. Now, the big question is, what happens next? Do you look the other way and pretend that it wasn't your dog? Immediately take full responsibility, break up the fight and apologise to all concerned, even if it was clearly not your fault? Or start to take bets on the winning hound? Shooting is a sport to be enjoyed by all, and that also includes all the dogs present. Encouraging a scrap is obviously not to be supported, but a quick squabble amongst their canine companions, especially when they're only doing their jobs by guarding their owners' birds, shouldn't be applauded by the owners, but might be quite cherished and enjoyed by the dogs themselves. What does the panel think?"
So I think I know who sent this in.
Oh, really?
Gregor.
Yeah. And I think I know what he's referring to.
Okay, so come on, give us the background then.
So I think this chap was on the day last Monday.
Really?
And I think that he's referring to the fact that Cora found herself in a fight with much embarrassment, except people got the wrong end of the stick. So what happened is...
So hang on, wait a minute. Are you about to tell us that Cora wasn't to blame?
Cora is the most timid little scared thing going. There's no way. So the keeper's dog ran out. They were just picking up behind my peg. And obviously we were there for hours because there was so much to pick up. And the keeper's dog came out.
I'm not rising to that.
Damn it. You must rise more often. The keeper's dog just went for Cora. Absolutely. There wasn't even a bird. They weren't like on a bird. You know when two dogs go for the same bird. And we must come back to that point. And just went for her, pinned her down, dog teeth round her straight away. One of the front teeth of this keeper's dog went straight through Cora's lip, bleeding like mad. And Cora was just like crying after.
Well,
I was really shaken up. I must say, it would have been here's a whose bird is it anyway dilemma for the podcast. Have you ever been on a day as a guest and killed the keeper's dog?
Or had your dog killed by the keeper's dog? Gosh, that's horrible though.
Well, it wasn't very nice. And I obviously then, I've tried so hard to then find a load of birds for Cora to collect to try and sort of take her mind off it as quickly as possible. So that was, that did sort it out. But the point being, everyone else thought, oh, look, ha, ha, ha. Dog's got a little scrap. One of the guns can't keep control of his dog, blah, blah, blah. You know, because it's usually that way around. It's not like the professionals' dogs, is it? Because they're well trained. So his question here, having slightly misunderstood the difficult scenario I'd found myself in, if it is who I think it is what happens when dog fights break out on shoots?
Gosh. Camilla, you have a number of dogs, don't you?
I have only 2 real ones.
What flavours have you got?
It's like when I say, how many horses do you have? I'm like, not very many. I've got 2 terriers. I think one of them just actually tried to break my microphone when you were telling the story. Patterdale, which is a bad idea, and a Staffy cross Jack.
Wow, what fun.
Yeah.
And I mean, this whole question, so yeah, I mean, guns and their dogs on shoot days, it can be quite a sort of a touchy subject, doesn't it? Can't it? Because guns
Very.
place a lot of store in how well behaved their dogs are, and it can be quite embarrassing if your dog isn't terribly well behaved. I think if my dog started a fight, I would be extremely mortified. But if your dog isn't the aggressor, then I think you're in a place of moral superiority, aren't you?
There's three very different feelings going on here, and I think he alludes to this in the questions. If it was your dog, do you look the other way and pretend it wasn't your dog? That's a personality trait thing going on there, like which way you react in the moment. But you would be mortified if your dog had gone for another dog. If you're on the receiving end of it, as I found out, it's like someone going for your child in a way.
Yeah.
Like you don't take kindly to it and you start to react in a way that's not very you. If you're a gun, there's no way you're not seeing a few of the guns stand and point and laugh.
Oh, it's excellent when it's somebody else's dog that's misbehaving in all circumstances, because part of that's the relief of it not being yours. Don't you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think that should be encouraged.
What, other people's dogs misbehaving?
And everyone laughing.
Yeah, everyone laughing at other people's dogs misbehaving. I think the more of that, the better. None of this, let's be too, poncy about it.
I guess the thing is, if it's your dog in the fight, you're always going to notice. So Chris knows the story inside out if it is the same story because it was his dog. Whereas everyone else is just going to go, my dog's here, it's fine. And then, so if it's your dog involved, don't you?
So the others all are standing there laughing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is three distinct roles being played by various people on the shoot here.
But I also partly thought when you told that story, in defense of the keeper's dog, having not been there, is that dog's probably been there since the middle of the summer. And he's like, this is my patch and these are my birds. So who's this bitch taking my bird? I don't know. I don't know how dogs think. But to an extent, that if it's the keeper's dog, it's probably been around for months, hasn't it?
So I must clarify, I wasn't the head keeper on this particular shoot because I do know him. Just in case other people know who the head keeper at Braxton is. That's really unfair on him. It was someone else involved in the shoot who was in the keeping team. So just before I get in trouble.
That you might never be asked back, Chris. Yeah, I mean, dogs do get grumbly on shoot days. I mean, we used to have a family black lab, who was the mildest mannered bloke you could ever imagine, but on shoot days his hackles would go up and he wouldn't ever be like properly aggressive, but he'd definitely get a bit kind of growly with other dogs. I don't think it ever quite led to fisticuffs as such, but definite sort of back off mate kind of vibes coming off him. I guess it's just the excitement of it, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think Camilla's point's interesting. If it is, if the dog does think, oh, it's my ground a little bit. It's like when someone comes up the driveway at home.
Yeah.
Straight to the door barking.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm over psychoanalyzing the dog, but it was just when you told the story, then you think, oh, but actually, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to be seen to encourage dogfighting.
No, definitely not.
Not
like you point out, Guns on Pegs does not endorse taking bets on dogfights.
Yeah.
Yeah. So his last point: do you start taking bets on the winning hound? Maybe not. But standing back, laughing, and pointing is perfectly acceptable, I think.
Yeah. And how is Cora's lip?
Not great.
But she can still retrieve her golf balls.
Well, yeah, not now she's been told she's not allowed to, but yes, in theory she would be able to.
But you didn't have to go to the vet or anything.
Well, I'm really scared of going to our vet because you have to remortgage your house each time you come home. And it just sort of makes you go, how bad could it be?
That's like I am with my kids and plasters. If they had a plaster every time they wanted one, then they'd have to open a new factory somewhere.
Yeah. We've had a lot of dog correspondence recently, and it's those scenarios there that really reminded me why we get a lot of dog correspondence, because it really does matter. When it's your dog, you really care about how it performs on the day. You want it to do really well, essentially as a little child of yours.
Yeah, well, I also think it's that time of year as well where people are going out with their dogs for the first time. And everybody, I think people are probably more nervous about their dog misbehaving than shooting badly. for example. I think people would rather shoot like a drain than have their dog run in.
I think you're probably right.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. But also, your shooting is your problem, or your dog is also your problem. But sadly, the dog has its own brain too, doesn't it? And it's like horses, and it's an animal under your control, but actually, how much control?
But I think it's also because people sort of see dogs as being a reflection of the owner, right?
They are.
So
if you've got an
Am I
unruly
not a
dog,
Chris is very meek, timid, rolls over and gets bitten on the lip. Don't hit me!
You said it, Camilla, not me. I do think there is an element of that. It's a bit like if your kids misbehave. It's somehow a failing of your own rather than of the other.
This is a failing right here.
Dog jumping up on podcast guests, not first time. And Camilla, where I will take your abuse there is actually I'm terribly kind on the peg and leaving all my birds to my neighbours. So maybe that's the gun equivalent of that.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Good. Right. Well, Chris, I think we'll press on. Got an unpopular opinion?
Yeah, before we do, why did you call him Gregor?
Gregor? Well, I'm starting to run out of dog-related names, but this was actually quite an easy one. This is Gregor Clegane of Game of Thrones, also known as the Hound.
Good. Right, so unpopular opinion, or rather unpopular timing. This submission comes from someone that George has called Ethelred. Have to come back to that in a second because I've not heard that word before.
The Unready.
You're ahead of him. Yes.
Well done. I'd like your opinion on something. You may be a little confused as to an email landing on your inbox entitled Beaters Day in October. However, our shoot has decided to host Beaters Day midway through the season this year. I, for one, am quite excited by this to see how it works and have the opportunity to shoot some drives we don't normally see. My only trepidation is that it may dull down the end of the season excitement, but that can be built back up with some slow gin and champagne, I'm sure. So I'd like your opinion on hosting early Beaters Days and if you've ever experienced this before. The answer for me, never. George, Camilla?
Never.
No, I've never come. The only thing that is slightly different, I mean, Beaters Days are a relatively modern thing, I think. It certainly used to be called Keeper's Day. And I think Keeper's Days maybe would have been slightly earlier in the season, perhaps. But probably still in January, but maybe mid-January rather than the last weekend of the season, which is sort of traditional for the Beaters Day. I think this is a really good idea.
You've just pulled on something we've got to come back to as well, because that's really interesting, because you're right. I always remember it being called Keeper's Day, but the keeper invited his helpers for the year, the beaters.
Yeah, or so maybe just his mates.
Well, that's awkward. If the unwritten rule was that you always invite the beaters and the people that have supported you, and then you come in as the new keeper on the shoot and just sack them all off and invite your mates. So what could go wrong on a keeper or Beaters Day in October, apart from a lot?
Well, I think the big worry would be them not coming back for the rest of the season.
Yeah. Point number one. Agree. That is
the day out.
We've had correspondence into the pod. We've read letters out in the not too distant past of people that go on the shoot for the Beaters Day, and that is a very justifiable reason to go beating at that shoot, or one of them. So you're right. Not coming back. Risk number one. Surely greediness is coming into this like you've never seen. I've been on some Beaters Days in my time, and obviously it's often like, cocks only, that sort of thing. But let's be honest, there's not a lot of cocks getting through that line.
I guess, the keeper is still in charge. He's still got his whistle. He can end the drive when he wants to. So I think you can get around that one.
Yeah.
But Beaters Days are bigger bags often than normal, I feel. Not that it's about the bag size.
Yeah. Often because there's twice as many guns.
Yeah. But you're still going to have twice as many guns on this one. So let's just say the syndicate shoots 100 birds normally, right?
Yeah.
They're shooting 200 on a Beaters Day. Maybe because there's twice as many guns, but that means they've got to shoot 200 in a mid-season calendar when they're usually shooting 100 bird days. That's not going down well with the syndicate, surely.
No. What did he say why he was doing it? Did I miss that bit? Why he was doing it now?
No explanation.
What had triggered this change? So I guess that's interesting because, as you say, I suppose how many beaters come for the beat? How many beaters stay for the season for the Beaters Day? How many do it because they like it's a day out to get some exercise and be outside and work their dogs. I don't know. Like Chris says, a lot do it for the beta stay, but a lot do it because they enjoy it. So are you going to lose people? Are you going to keep their interest by having a beta stay?
Maybe the guy running the shoot has given up. He's had such a bad start to the year that he's decided, sod it, we're going to have all our fun now and literally just disappear. He's going to run off to the hills and he's just having his beta
Just
stay.
shoot October, have your beta stay on Halloween and just done. Call it a day.
The other guns are going to turn up to their days in December and there'll be no one there.
Is it on Halloween? Maybe it's like a pumpkin shooting day. Ghost or something. The ghost of pheasants past.
I think this is a total aside. I think a pumpkin clay pigeon shoot situation with a sort of slingshot would be a very satisfying thing.
Are you shooting the clays with pumpkins, or are you shooting pumpkins?
I'm slinging the pumpkins with a giant sort of trebuchet situation, and then shooting the pumpkins. I reckon they would explode in a very satisfactory
really cool.
way.
It's like Fruit Ninja. Is that what it's called?
Don't know.
Yeah, it used to be David Cameron. Oh, it was David Cameron's favourite game. It's on your phone. I'm sure it's called Fruit Ninja. We've never done it.
Okay, no.
So it's an app, and there's like watermelon come flying up, and you have like a machete, and you just cross them, and then all the fruit explodes.
Okay.
So yeah, like your pumpkin.
That sort of effect.
Does a pumpkin at 30 yards have a nice explosion to it?
I imagine it. I've never shot a pumpkin at 30 yards, but
I reckon it needs to be a bit rotten to go because they're quite hard, aren't they? Like,
yeah.
I don't know. Try it.
Hey, well, look, it's
Give
the
it a
21st
go.
of October as we're recording. I think this is something that absolutely has to be organised.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, you can bring the pumpkin and we'll shoot one on Friday.
I drive past a PYA on the way there.
There you go. Perfect. But no, I kind of think this is quite a good idea because I do sometimes, particularly on smaller shoots where maybe by the time Peter's Day comes around, there aren't that many birds about anymore. If you've got a part-time keeper, for example, that's not been able to quite keep them on the place, people's bags do diminish over the course of a season. And I think letting the beaters have a go, kind of in the peak of things is quite a nice gesture.
So you're going popular?
I like it. Yeah, I think this is it's popular with me anyway. I think it's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea. Because otherwise you sort of feel like it's the last thing you do, beta stay, and then off we go. Whereas actually in the middle of the season, it's a little bit more important as a beta, having your day on a proper day, not beta's day.
I definitely agree with that. There's an interesting vibe in that. I think the atmosphere of drawing pegs and all that and the start of a beta's day in October would be somewhat different to one at the end of the year.
Yeah.
However, I just think there is something so brilliant about the atmosphere on a beta's day at the end of the season that cannot be replaced.
There can be quite a carnival atmosphere, can't there? It's sort of the culmination of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Is this guy doing both? Is he doing his now and then it's done?
Well,
just this one. Just October.
Oh, no. So our shoot has decided to host Beta's Day midway through the season this year. So that suggests there is one Beta's Day and it's now in October.
Yeah, I do also think you're right. Like you say, Beta's Day is a bit, like Carnival. It's got that atmosphere, hasn't it? It's end of season party type thing. So
I think the owner's won the Euro Millions and he's moving to the British Virgin Islands before Christmas.
Yeah, it's not a bad move.
Okay, we're gonna have a vote then. Chris, good idea or bad idea? Popular or unpopular?
I'm going unpopular.
Okay, Camilla.
I think they should do one in October and January.
Okay, on the fence. Good. I'm saying this is a popular idea. I like this idea a lot. I think it's a really good one. So the result of that is inconclusive.
Sorry, I've ruined it.
I think it's the first time we've ever been unable to reach a conclusion as to whether it's a good idea or not. But I think that's good. So I'd love to know how it goes.
We need to whack a poll on social media for this.
That's a good idea.
This has to be Beta's Day in October or end of January.
Yeah, like that.
If you could get people to select.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, when you do things like that, people don't revert from what they know or what they're used to and what they don't like change, generally, people
in general.
they don't. January will win that poll.
It needs some context, doesn't it? I mean, I
It
think
does.
having then had the discussion made people perhaps change their minds. Whereas
Yeah.
without the discussion, you just go, yeah, January, that's when you have
think-
it, end of the season tick.
I
Well,
think we
what I'll
posted
do
the
is-
whole letter.
What I'll do is I'll clip the bit where I read it out, and we'll put it up on stories and see what happens.
Good
Cool.
idea. Cool. So we have our first podcast suggestion.
Well, it's not actually our first. I just forgot to change the script. It's our second Muck podcast.
We have
suggestion.
our first. Start again. We have our second Muck podcast suggestion, and this one comes from someone called Anonymous. Oh, hold on.
Start again. It's from the same guy. He
Okay,
tacked it on the
just-
back of his letter.
Edit this whole bit because this is
I'm
you're
gonna leave
editing.
it. I'm going to leave
You're
it.
you're editing as I'm reading. And it's really hard to read sentences if they're changing as you're looking at them. We have our second Muck podcast suggestion, and this one comes from also Ethelred,
Yeah.
who included this. It actually says in the script, Ethelred also. So I'll read that. Included a Muck podcast for our discussion. As a little extra detail, he's included a person he'd like to accompany him on each leg. So the Muck podcast, if you've not heard this pod before, is fur, feather, fin, 3 different continents. You can do it in one day because you can borrow the Guns on Pegs time machine. It's well used, got quite a few miles under its belt now. And he says,
Hang on, wait a
Fur.
second. Do time machines do miles, or do they do time? Another one for Instagram poll. Go on.
They do time, don't they? You end up back in the place you started. But you could still fly somewhere, then go back, couldn't you?
Yeah,
still
okay.
had to get there. And when you see the time machine in Doctor Who, it's definitely moving.
You can just apparate like in Harry Potter.
Yeah. This is we've strayed into philosophy. Continue.
So for his fur part of the Muck pod, he's doing Red Deer in New Zealand with Steve Ranella. So Red Deer, New Zealand, fine. Chosen a very famous person to go and shoot his Red Deer with. Lots of stories. Be quite an interesting stalk 8 hours out in the hill, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Feather, he is going to do sage grouse with Ronnie. I need a pronunciation, George.
Boheme, possibly.
But Ronnie Boheme, more specifically his Bracco Italiano HPRs. Okay, interesting. So this guy is clearly a well-known dog handler in the US. So
Braccos
Fine.
are lovely dogs. Have you come across? Have you met any?
I don't know if I have. I must have. It's one of those things you're like, oh yeah, those, if you Googled it.
Yeah.
Okay, so interesting. So sage grouse, so walked up with pointers. Fun. A lot of fun.
Very
in that.
nice. Yeah.
And for Finn, fly fishing for salmon in Scotland with my father. So he's finished it off like a lot of Desert Island shootings finish off with all the nostalgia tapped into one, reliving things that you've already
Yeah.
done before. Very nice, very enjoyable. All possible in one day easily.
I do have a bit of a bone to pick with this.
Go on.
Well, Steve Ranella, as everybody probably knows, has got a very successful hunting podcast. I also happen to know that Ronnie Boheme has a very successful hunting specifically a sort of bird dog podcast. So he's chosen 2 podcasters to go on his trips with him, and neither of them is us.
So what you're saying is actually he should have gone salmon fishing in Scotland with you instead of his dad.
Yeah. And taken you to go and shoot walked up grouse in America.
Okay, reply. It does sound fun though. I'm most interested in the sage grouse aspect of that.
Big old red deer in New Zealand, no.
Also fun. Very good.
So, Gregor, Ethelred, and now you, Camilla, are the newest members of the most noble order of the Garters and will very soon be in receipt of a set of the much coveted Guns on Pegs podcast Shooting Sock Garters. If you too have got a shooting confession, a quandary, or a query that you'd like us and our guests to help you with, or if you've got an unpopular opinion, or if you have a Muck podcast selection to share and you would like a set of Garters, drop us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com.
So I was chatting with a friend the other day and he said you really need to get people's suggestions on funniest drive names.
Okay. And so we've done what have we done? We've done Forgotten Drives, which is slightly different, and then we've done, what was it, best drive names? So we're just going more specific.
Best drives, just like no, hold on, we didn't do that.
Didn't we? Okay, I can't remember. We've done too many of these. I don't know.
If you can't remember, then no one else probably can, so I wouldn't worry.
It didn't happen, so we'll run it as the second two. Funniest drive names. It started in conversation, and he mentioned a couple. I actually forgot what they were, but everyone was in fits of laughter straight away because there are some hilarious ones out there. So pod@gunsonpegs.com. Just send them in. A little bit of context is always helpful, but just funniest drive names. Some of them don't need any context. They're just hilarious on their own. So pod@gunsonpegs.com. Thank you.
Okay, great. Good. Okay, Camilla, I want to start by asking you some very important questions. A topic that's come up on the podcast a number of times over the previous 90 whatever episodes it is now is the activity of hunting with golden eagles in Mongolia. I think you're the only person who's been on the podcast who has actually been to Mongolia. Did you fly a golden eagle?
No. But I held a golden eagle on my arm, which was a flying, obviously they're all flying ones. So I've been to Mongolia twice. So I went in 2010, I did the Mongol Derby, which was then, I think it probably still is, the longest multi-stage horse race in the world. It's in the Guinness Book of Records. So when I did it, we had to fill it. That was the year that was the Guinness record. But it might not be there anymore, because I think they update it all the time. But it was amazing. It was, an amazing experience. But I think it is obviously a race. So you're going from station to station, changing horses. You're in a bit of a rush. So I went back. It was just after COVID. So it must have been, I don't know, you probably know when it was, George, 2022, maybe 3 years ago. And I went with a friend. A friend organised it. We was a riding trip. So I think we rode for 6 days. But in a lot more sedate, enjoy Mongolia type fashion. And then the end, we went to an eagle hunting festival, which they have in September. I think there's a couple of them, so they don't just have one. But it's a bit like Peterborough. You maybe shooting people don't know that. It's like a hunting festival, your festival of your eagles. You're celebrating your eagles, and
so everyone brings along their eagle.
Yeah, they bring their hunting eagles, and they do displays. So they catch lures off. So they go up, up this mountain. So you're at the base, and they've got not hills, like a cliff, and they, chuck the eagle off the cliff, and it hunts the lure. So you have the best one there. They have sort of junior competitions as well, and they have all the different Mongolian sports as well. So the one where they fight for a dead goat between them off a horse, and camel racing and fun things like that. And then one of the things that is, so Mongolians get their pet eagles from the golden eagle's nest. So they take them as chicks. They raise them in their yurts. So they keep them in the house, basically, with the family. But they only keep them, I think it's about 4 years. So they hunt with them. They hunt wolves, they hunt foxes, and then they release them into the wild. So the end of this festival is, I think 3 or 4 men went off onto the hill and they released their eagles back into the wild.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
I imagine that's quite a sort of emotional thing.
It is emotional. I think emotional for them, and they go round on their horse with their eagle. They show it off, and then they go off up onto the cliff, and they fly. Well, I think 2 flew off. 1 then came back, but they have to stay and then make it fly off, because obviously they can hunt. They've been hunting with humans, but obviously they are used to an extent to being with that human. But I think it was emotional to watch, and obviously I don't speak Mongolian, but you could see that it was an emotional time, and that is the big hurrah, if that makes sense, of the festival.
Yeah.
So I haven't actually hunted with an eagle myself, but I've seen them do it as a lure, as an exhibition. I think one of the coolest things I did there was, it was a 2-day festival, and we were staying with a local family in their yurts. So we were riding back. We'd gone on horses. We were riding back, maybe whatever it was, 5 kilometers. And these 4 eagle hunters went past us. And it was sunset, and they're riding across the Mongolian desert with their bird perched on there. It was huge. It was just amazing. And they're riding off into the sunset, basically. That was pretty cool.
Amazing. You've got to be pretty strong in your upper body to ride a horse and carry an eagle simultaneously.
Yeah, what's a golden eagle weighing these days?
I have no idea. A fair bit. But they have like a little perch thing on their saddle as well. So it has like a little.
Really?
So when they're hunting, it does come back to their arm, but they also have like a little perch.
So the eagle rides the horse
Yeah.
and does horseback hunting.
Yeah.
Just leaves the horse and goes and gets something and then comes back to its
Yeah.
horse.
Amazing.
But I
Gotta
mean,
be
the
10
person's on
kilos.
horse too. Yeah, I think so. I mean, they're big. I have no idea what they'd weigh.
So I think I'm right in saying that Sarah Farnsworth photographed the Mongol Derby some years
She did.
back.
She has done. She didn't do the year I did, but she has also been out to photograph it. Yeah.
And just tell us a little bit about the experience of doing the Mongol Derby. Where does it begin? Is it a loop?
No, so it changes each year the route, but it's not a loop. So it's based on Chinggis, as they call him, but Genghis, if you want to call him that, Genghis Khan's postal route. So when he was the leader, whatever you want to call him, dictator of the world. So he had a postal system which ran from Naughty Elephant Skywalker to the east of his empire to the west. So he had horsemen, and they would be taking, it's like the Royal Mail, the Chinggis Mail. So they would have to stop every 40 kilometers, change horse, get one. And I can't remember what the stat is. He could get a message from one end of his empire to the other in X number of days. I've definitely ruined it because I don't know the stats, but pretty quick. So they had horses lined up along the way. Postman's coming, quick, get him a horse, off he goes. So it's based on that. So they have horse stations. It's 1,000 kilometers. You have horse stations it's between 20 to 40 kilometers, I think.
And you change horse.
And you change horse at each station. You don't really know. So it might have changed slightly, but when I did it, they have a set route which you can sort of follow, but it's not flagged. You know, you have a Garmin navigator, which sort of tells you the route they like, or you can go the direct route. But the direct route is probably through a bog and over a mountain. So you can do what you want. But if you don't, they have a suggested route, or you can do what you want.
So you need like 30 horses of your own.
Yeah. So 30 stations. Yeah. Whatever.
This.
Yeah. But they're not yours. I mean, they borrow them. So my friend Katie was working for the Adventurists then, and she went out before, and she went and visited all the families. And I think actually she did it the year before they were going to do it. It might be a few months before. I might be wrong. But she went out, met the families, talked to them, saw the horses. So they did sort of a health check on the horses to check that everything is right. And they've got, people in Mongolia as well who'd sort of teed things up, and they go and, the Mongolian family would say, we've got, these 20 horses, and then they'd choose maybe 10 from those. And they obviously get paid for the use of their horses. And then they go back to the station I think the horses finish at the station where they live, so they don't have to go back. So I think they take them to the station before, and then I think they finish at the station they live.
Yeah.
So that's the general concept. And I think now it's quite, you get sort of lots of professional endurance riders do it. Not lots, but a few. It was only the second year they'd ever done it when I did it. So we had one or maybe two who were sort of proper endurance riders. And everyone else was, a mix of people. Some people who did some endurance riding, some people who had, one girl I know had inherited some money from her grandparents to buy a horse, and she went, well, I don't have the lifestyle to have a horse, but I'd rather spend it on this experience. So all different people, different ages. I think when we did it, there were 18 started, maybe 14 finished. One girl broke her collarbone before the start line, so that wasn't great. But I think she came back and did it the next year, so that was good. But you're sort of stuck in the middle of nowhere. So they have got, I think, when we did it, I think it was 3 or 4 support vehicles. But obviously they're along the route, so you all start on the same day, but you've got up to 10 days to compete it. So you could have people which are sort of 2-3 days. I think the first guy finished on day 6. I finished on day 7, but you had another 3 days. So if you do fall off and break your leg and your leg's poking out.
You're 3 days in, you've got a long way to get back to the airport.
Well, but I mean, they can't. Yeah.
It sounds great fun.
Yeah, it is great fun. It was amazing. And the horses are, fantastic in their own way, but they are definitely not something you'd get in an English riding school. Some of them were great. Some of them were a bit wild, to say the least. But that adds to the fun of it.
So, George,
Yeah.
would you choose to go on the Mongol rally or this hunting celebration with the eagles in Mongolia if you had to pick one?
Do you know what? I love the idea of a trek, but I am quite allergic to horses, so I think it would be the eagles, just because the idea of having streaming eyes and nose and an itchy face for 1,000 kilometers doesn't fill me with joy.
Can I just say I'm also allergic to horses, and I've always been allergic to horses, and it used to be
Really?
really bad. Well, then I gave myself asthma by being allergic to horses, but ignoring it and saying to my body, "Shut up! I'm riding a horse." So now I just can't breathe. But maybe if you keep at it, you might get asthma, and then you
Hold
just
on,
need inhalers instead. So it's
and
okay.
you're still all over horses. This is like the definition of insanity, isn't it?
Probably, but do you know what? I mean, probably not going to help the whole concept of horse girls being mad. But I actually know quite a few people who are allergic to horses and are really horsey. So I think I don't know what I think. We're all mad, basically. So I can't clip.
Yeah.
So that's good. I can't clip my own horses. So I'm not just lazy.
Does that mean you can't, muck them out, look after them,
Just keep them away.
turn up for the good stuff?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just point it in the right direction and I'll get on.
Yeah.
Chris, what about you? Would you go eagles or trek?
I'm going eagles. It's just something about that culture of hunting with eagles that I'm just fascinated by. I like the birds in their little hats as well.
It's amazing, the whole culture. And they had a wolf, a coat made from the furs of all the wolves that eagle had caught last year. So I held an eagle wearing his coat, which was made from the wolves he'd caught the year before.
That's epic.
That was pretty cool.
That's very cool.
Do you reckon he knows what he's wearing? Yeah. I mean, is he standing there, chest puffed
It's
out?
like, yeah, they're my wolves.
Okay, so from Mongolia to Russia, my next question is about your recent Scribehound piece and the new Jilly Cooper adaptation Rivals, which I watched the first couple of episodes last night, and I'm very much enjoying it. So, along with all the bonking, there's a lot of field sports in there. There's some hunting and some shooting. We had some American sporting agents on the podcast a few months ago, and they told us that Downton Abbey had really kind of picked up the number of Americans who were interested in coming over here to shoot. Do you think Rivals might have the same effect?
It might well do. I hadn't actually thought about that. I had read some reviews saying, what will the American audiences think of this? Because obviously it's on Disney Plus. So, it's a very English-centric story, isn't it? But as you say, like Downton, like a lot of the, Bridgerton and a lot of these other things that are doing really well on TV, and the Americans in particular do love that side of the English culture. Hadn't thought about it, but we can only hope. I mean, we do get a fair few, I think, American tourists coming over for English hunting, but I hope that would trigger more of them to come. And like you say, there's shooting as well so far. I was going to ask you if you haven't been watching Rivals. You're missing out.
I didn't know. And we've just lined up another one. So, we just had one start that we're into. So this is next. This is definitely next. I love anything like this.
Have you ever read Jilly Cooper?
I don't know if I had, but then I know all about those books, but I don't think I read them.
Those books.
Those ones with the naughty pictures on the front.
Those dirty books.
They're slightly iconic, aren't they?
Yeah. I think the covers they are iconic.
The covers are iconic, actually.
It was quite interesting because I wrote that Scribehound piece, so I hadn't seen any of it. So I think they had Disney were very strict about. I know that everyone who went to see the screenings before had very strict things about what they were allowed to say. They were only allowed to see the first 2 episodes. I'm not important enough to see any of the screenings. So I wrote that whole piece sort of in hope of what I thought might come of the Disney Plus adaptation, but I didn't know. But I think having seen it now, I haven't finished. I think I'm on episode 5, but I feel like it was everything I wanted and more.
That's a good review.
Just going to keep selling it. I had high hopes, and it's so good.
I love any of these programs which touch upon British traditional heritage. I think because you're absolutely right in what our guest was saying about Downton. I mean, Downton is slightly in a league of its own. I think for anything to ever get close to that anytime soon is almost impossible. But I think this is cool. I think this is good for brand Britain, as much as a lot of people don't want it to be.
I think it is, and I think also if you look at the, I know they said they spent a lot of time and research getting, 1980s Laura Ashley fabrics and things, but a lot of what the people are wearing is, Barbour country wear, isn't it? Gilets and shuffles, not just in the shooting scenes. They're all in a lot of the time. They're in the countryside. They're outdoors. So they might be beneficial for those kind of clothing brands and things, as well as for hunting and shooting visitors, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Did you see the comments from people getting really upset about the gun handling?
I did, and I haven't replied because I said to George, I'll just get really angry, so give me some time to breathe, and I haven't done it because it was sort of like, tell me you haven't read the piece without telling me you haven't read the piece. But, I haven't actually replied because I haven't quite brought myself to breathe.
It's so classic, isn't it? Shooting
that's the whole point,
publications. Yeah. Shooting publications putting out bad gun handling in pictures is like, it's like there's an army of people that must be on the same WhatsApp group going, "Arr!" and then sending messages in.
I think they always used to say at The Spectator, don't read below the comment line, but I could never help myself. No, I do. And I think, if anyone who has, hopefully you might have read the piece by now, but the whole point is that the people in the picture don't know how to behave on a shoot day, which is why they are walking around with unbroken guns.
Because they're all absolute shits, every last one of them. That's the point.
That's the whole point.
You were talking though about the costumes and the design of the show. I think in some ways the fact that people looking at that photo have failed to spot that it's David Tennant and Danny Dyer in the picture tells you a lot about how well they have done the costumes and all the rest of it. I mean, it feels so true to life.
Yeah, that's very true. I hadn't even thought about that, but yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, the one that people were getting really angry about was Danny Dyer holding his gun at sort of just both arms stretched out down with the gun to the side whilst walking in a group of people. Yeah. I mean, obviously it's horrendous, but yeah, as you say.
But obviously that's the point.
But it's very clearly Danny Dyer as well. I mean, maybe there's a lot that don't know who he is, but I don't know. He's tried his hardest to make sure everyone knows who he is there, hasn't he?
Yeah. He is very good in it, actually. He doesn't ham it up too much. I think it's good.
It took me a second to realise who it was when he first appeared on screen. It was like, oh, shit, that's Danny Dyer. Yeah. There he is. So, yeah, I've really enjoyed the first couple of episodes, and I don't suppose I'm really the target market, so I can highly recommend it.
So that's good. Yeah. I stick by my guns, this is the most exciting thing to happen this October. So
I'm looking forward to it. We talked about horses a bit, but on the basis that you're really keen on hunting, it would be a remiss of us not to ask for your opinion and reflections. Obviously, hunting's had a lot of airtime in the last few months due to a change in government and stuff like that. And this is a shooting podcast. So without going into that in too much detail, I think from your point of view, on reflection, what is it that shooting needs to learn from hunting over the last 20 odd years or longer even? And do you think that, obviously you're in an influential position at the NGO as well, but what is it that we really need to be thinking about at this stage?
It's a big question. I mean, I don't know what I think. Give me a minute.
I think, like, if you go back to 2003, there was a big fight essentially that played itself out in the form of a march, and because it was an attack on a culture really more than anything. That's why it drew so many people to the streets of London. But since then, a lot has happened. And so shooting hasn't come under any form of ban like hunting had or has. So it's had this scenario now for 20 years where it's had to adapt to a legal framework, which shooting hasn't. And that is a very, very different mindset. Well, there's a lot of people who really just hate the fact that there was ever a law put in place and don't agree with it, so have their own interpretation of that. And others who obviously want to maintain it going forward. And that ends up splitting ranks quite a lot.
Yeah, it does. And I think if you talk particularly about hunting now, as you say, there's people who are still trying to fight the ban, repeal the ban. As you say, that it's over 20 years now that's been in place. I think there's no, personally, I think we need to move forward with the laws that there are and, trail hunt, which is what people are doing. I think the BHSA are trying to promote that. They had a National Trail Hunting Day in September, and the aim of that was to get as many senior police officers journalists and MPs to come and watch and see what does go on. I think with hunting now, it's trying to preserve anything, the ability to keep a pack of hounds, numbers of hounds. And I don't know, as you say, the current government have made various manifesto pledges. I don't know what is going to happen or when. But equally, I think when you look at shooting, you do have to wonder whether the current government will be looking at what's happened in other, devolved governments. You look at Wales, for example. And I think, as you say, hunting in 2004, what happened then was the beginning of, I know people will say attack on our rights, but it was very much a countryside issue. I think now, because laws have started to come in, so the hunting first, perhaps things will change for shooting, and then once you start creating more laws, then what's next? Sort of, I know people talk about fishing. I think everyone thinks that they're not going to be the next person in the firing line. I think from the sound of, there are definitely organisations who are encouraging the government to target shooting and to make some legal changes, whatever they might be. And I think it's just, I suppose in terms of shooting, it's making sure you're ahead of the game, trying to show all the beneficial sides of it, show the economic benefits, show the mental health, all the health benefits of it, whether that's mental health, physical health. As we were talking about, beaters people going out shooting, for a lot of people, that's a large part of their social life throughout the winter. And I think just demonstrating that, and obviously the huge conservation benefits, I think, there wouldn't be a lot of the biodiversity that there is without gamekeepers doing their work. And, there are bird organisations who would like to tone that down and pretend that doesn't happen, but it does happen. And, I think you have to think about what the state of the wildlife in the UK would look like without shooting and shooting estates. And obviously that's all private funding as well. That's not coming from from any charitable donations, not coming from the public purse. It's people who happen to enjoy shooting, putting that money into managing their own land. So yeah.
Those various arguments, I think, is a very interesting one, because I was speaking to, I can't remember if it was on the podcast or if it was at some other do, but Ian Coghill was saying that one of the mistakes that was made in the lead up to the hunting ban was who was put up to appear on telly, and that it was often, slightly red trousered older gentlemen of a particular type, and that sort of automatically prevented their message from getting across. And I suppose the NGO is a comparatively new organisation, but it does represent gamekeepers, right? So I guess you'd be hoping that, should there be the need for similar sort of campaign, that the people who are on the ground doing the work would have a bit of a louder voice.
I couldn't agree more. I think, and actually, do you remember the last feature on Countryfile? It was quite NGO led.
Yeah.
Is it David Pooler? I forget.
Yeah, Dave Pooler.
And he was a brilliant choice, because you got to look at, in the shooting world, who is the least easy to cancel, and it's the gamekeeper.
Yeah.
In which case they have to be the people fronting shooting going forward.
It was interesting doing that Countryfile piece, because they I probably shouldn't say too much, but Countryfile came to us and said, we want to do a piece on shooting. Would you be interested? And a lot of people, I think, were nervous of doing it, both within the NGO and outside. People who knew that it was happening, would probably have preferred that shooting stayed quiet and didn't pretend that we didn't exist. They said, what's the benefit of putting shooting on Countryfile? It's all towny file. People aren't going to like it. You're just going to get negative publicity for shooting. And I spoke to the researchers and the producers and David, and I knew, obviously, it's the BBC, they had to have a balance. It wasn't going to be all shooting. They did the rewilding side of it as well. What can you do on an estate instead of, if you don't have a shoot? Sort of, I think they'd given up their shoot, was it 20 years ago? And had some rewilding zone. But
it was an awful example, though.
Yeah, it was a bad example.
It was like a 25 bird shoot that shot twice a year. I
Yeah.
mean, like that's almost an accident shoot.
Yeah. But people were they were not keen on it because they didn't want shooting or the concept to be on the BBC. But I thought it was a good idea, and some other people at the NGO did, so we did it, and I think it came out well. I know no one's ever going to be happy with everything. But as you say, I think the people on the ground, the gamekeepers whose job it is, whose livelihoods it is, and who are actually doing the work, the conservation work, all of that, I think are the people who need to be speaking out. And we've been reaching out to a lot of ministers, Labour MPs, and I make that point. We're not the people with all the money, the private landowners. These are the people on the ground who are a big part of the rural communities, part of the rural economy. They're living their lives. Their kids go to local schools. These are the people on the ground. So that's where we're coming at it from.
I think that's absolutely crucial, because I think this argument about culture that's being made in hunting now, about trying to establish a sort of protection area around the fact that this is a culture. I mean, look, there's a lot of people who think that's laughable, some that think it's got legs, but I mean, I personally think it's actually better than most of the arguments I've heard, because I think a lot of the others are actually quite weak in 2024 politics. I don't think they're weak personally, just generally, but I'm trying to win a battle here, not a principle thing. It's not about that anymore, unfortunately. And so, and that's the reason I think the keeper argument is so strong in shooting. When you have someone talk about their livelihood, their culture, their way of life, everything that they've done for generations, that's very hard to argue with, because who am I to tell them not to do that? Whereas when you talk to someone who, I like to go shooting, oh my God, you're a sitting duck.
Yeah.
Awful phrase in that instance,
Yeah.
and so, but that for me is the culture argument has to be the one that, because we will have history in 100 years' time, and there'll be elements of history which is potentially slightly outdated. And I think you look at some things that go on these days, and you're like, oh my God, why do people still do that? And the animal cruelty one obviously comes into this, so that will be the reason that bit of history might not be around anymore in 100 years from now. But there will still be bits when people go, why on earth do people still live in old houses like that when you can now live in eco homes which basically fund themselves? That will still happen.
Is it? I mean, gamekeeping is famously a fairly solitary endeavor. Now, it's probably too sweeping a statement to say that gamekeepers are shy of the limelight. There's definitely a few who aren't. But is it challenging for you guys to find keepers who are prepared to go and engage with the media?
Yeah. In short, yes, it is. I mean, I think with the NGO, the way we're set up, we've got regional chairmen across the counties. So we try and encourage all of them to do media training to make sure everyone's fully briefed. So if something does come in and they say, we're in Norfolk or we're talking about whatever it is, have we got someone? And we try to make sure we can find someone. But it is hard because I think, as you say, keepers aren't particularly keen on talking. And I think particularly when they're talking to the media and they're talking about shooting or conservation, they're same with anyone, but you're worried about saying the wrong thing.
Understandably. Yeah, but they just got to be themselves at the end of the day. It's interesting you mentioned this because Anna Jones, one of the writers on Scrypound Countryside, she set up Just Farmers, which essentially does that for farming. It basically tries to find farmers that have the opportunity or have the strengths in the right. They're like a sort of unpolished diamond, as it were, and she trains them up to then be public facing to try and
to be media savvy, so that they can go on, they can appear in the media and not feel like they're out of their depth. I think that's the main thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I assume the NGO finds these keepers when they spot keepers who they think would be good. Do they sort of try and do that and invest in a bit of training for them to use them as spokespeople?
Yeah. So we do some media training, but as you say, when we find people, we say, we sort of, I don't try and tee them up, but especially if we know we've got a specific topic coming up, I'll talk to people and just make sure, try and hold their hand to an extent, say it's okay. I think one thing that's quite interesting as well is the regional moorland groups, which are up in the uplands. So there's 7 regional moorland groups, and each of them has a regional coordinator. This is a bit separate from the NGO, but I know I've written about the regional moorland groups actually. But I've sort of done little media training days with them, and it was just get in front of a camera and talk about something related to the moorland groups that's of interest to you. So perhaps sort of a Let's Learn More event, which is the moorland event, kids' school events they do, or barn owls or anything, and just go back through it, do it on camera, look at it back, then do it again. And just having that tiny little bit of training made them more confident in then being able to do it again. And then I think I had sort of Joe and Tracy both talk. I did a little Instagram video to go with the Scribe Hound piece, but they both spoke to me on camera, and you can tell, how much more confident they were having just done a little bit. And also I think the same with the shows. Both the NGO and the regional moorland groups do various shows across the country, and obviously some of them are, the shooting show. Well, the keepers are going to be quite happy talking to people at the shooting show. That's your natural you're in your element, aren't you? Yeah. But sort of at the Great Yorkshire Show, for example, the whole point is to reach out to the wider public, and Chatsworth shows like that. And we always have keepers on the stand, dressed up in their work uniform and talking to the public, talking to the kids. And we always have a display of, stoats, weasels, everything, ground nesting birds, and the kids come along and they like looking at those, and then you start talking to them. And so I think that also helps as well, because then you're engaging with the public, talking about your job. And the more you do of that, then the more confident you are doing it on another public platform. So it all helps.
Yeah, very true.
So, Camilla, the way we like to round these podcasts off with a little bit of a thought experiment, and it goes like this: the extinction level event asteroid hits tomorrow. Your affairs are in order. Your loved ones and enemies are reconciled. Your dogs are fed and the tomatoes are watered. Your last day begins how?
So, I know I'm supposed to talk about shooting, but I can put some shooting at the end of this day, I think. So, obviously, I think you probably all know about the McNab Challenge, but they also do a few variations on this, which I'm sure you're well aware of. One is called the McCharlie. So the whole idea is 3 different packs of hounds within one day. So I think it's supposed to be foxhounds, harriers, and staghounds all in one day. But I reckon you wouldn't necessarily have to ride. I think you could do at sunrise, foxhounds on your horse. I think you probably have to be in the West Country for this. So foxhounds at sunrise, follow your foxhounds, have an amazing morning, then breakfast, and some sloe gin, or maybe buxes. Then beagles. You go out with beagles on foot. Do that for a couple of hours. Then you can have your lunch. Then staghounds. I'm not sure how this is going to work logistically, but it's fine. So then staghounds, you're back on your horse. Autumn stag, and then you can do some duck flighting in the evening.
Very nice.
I don't think you need it. This is awesome. I don't think you need a time machine. I actually think we could save some money here, George, and do it in a taxi. I think we do it in a taxi, actually.
Yeah. I think you can save on the time machine.
You can definitely. You're right about West Country. I mean, that's.
Yeah. And then does Uber do horse boxes?
I'm sure we can find someone.
Go on the app.
Yeah, but
I bet they do in Mongolia.
Horse.
Yeah, Uber horse. So I've cut the harriers out and swapped them for beagles, so it's better.
Uber horse might be an actual horse turning up. You need.
Yeah. You want the Uber horse box, but you need the Uber horse too, because when you finish your beagling, you need your next horse for staghounds.
So like hirelings, this becomes just Uber horse.
Yeah.
rent
Uber horse just sounds like a huge horse.
An Uber horse. I'm trying to think of some clever way of Uber, but related to a horse, but I can't think of anything. No, it's not working. Hoof buff? No. On the hoof? Yep. Okay, yeah.
You did well there. If you were down on Exmoor, you'd go duck flighting on the coast, on the north coast somewhere around there. Yes. That would be great fun. This is possible.
Mm-hmm. I think it definitely is possible.
I like it. I really like it.
Isn't the whole point to have to die at the end of it?
Yeah, the asteroid will hit.
Yeah, you don't have to kill yourself. It will do it for you.
Okay, fine, good. Yeah, like the dinosaurs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I reckon that would be my day.
Do you need any particular people there with you?
No. I could do my hounds. That'd be nice. If I had all the foxhounds that I've walked, could be my little pack for the day. I reckon I'd have a good pack there.
Yeah, very good.
That's cool. Yes.
So we did actually have this discussion I think it was last season out hunting, and we said, I reckon we should have like your teams. So I don't know what games you play where you've got your teams, but you make your teams of your people. Don't need to fight, whatever kids do on computer games. But my team is my hounds. So I think I've walked like 8 couple of hounds, maybe 7. So I've got 14, 16 hounds in my pack, and I think I've got a strong pack of hounds. So my pack versus, someone else who's walked some hounds. So you have your hunting pack. I don't know how we win or whatever we do, but so I reckon my hounds would have to come with me.
That's lovely.
You'd go out with a bang.
And a quack.
Well, if you missed it, of course. Thank you very much, Camilla, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. It has been good fun.
It's been really good fun. Thank you ever so much, Camilla.
A pleasure.
All that remains for me to say is that there's a final reminder that you can get your hands on a pair of the very exclusive Guns on Pegs podcast shooting sock garters by sending us your shooting dilemmas for us to resolve, or by sharing your unpopular opinions, your forgotten drives, your favourite drive names, the funniest drive names, your podcast suggestions. Just drop us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com, and if we read it out in the next episode or any future episodes, we will send you some garters. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time after the podcast shoot day. But until then, thanks very much for listening, and goodbye.
Wow.